You are watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV from Toronto, Ontario. I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. How is the Shia community in Canada commemorating Muharram? We will talk with Sheikh Rizvi. But first, some news headlines. Canadian historian wants the government to apologise for Canada's role in slavery. IHMC declares October's theme. Online event to address challenges faced by Muslim mothers. Palestinian teen killed by Israeli forces in the West Bank laid to rest. And now the details. Afua Cooper, principal investigator for the African Canadian Heritage Project, a Black People's History of Canada, wants the government to issue an apology for Canada's participation in slavery. A media source reported Cooper saying that despite the abolition of slavery in Canada in 1834, the ripple effect could be felt for future generations. Cooper says racial discrimination in schools has limited career choices for Black Canadians, impacting their lifestyle. The investigator mentions that the last segregated school closed only in 1983 in Lincolnville, Nova Scotia. Cooper says that an apology from the government is, quote, absolutely necessary, as the post-slavery era was influenced by the period of slavery. The theme of this year's Islamic History Month in October is multicultural flavors of Muslim cuisine. The announcement comes from a press release yesterday from Shahina Siddiqui, Chair of Islamic History Month Canada. According to the IHMC's website, the objective of this year's theme is to showcase the culinary contributions of Canadian Muslims in the sectors of health, wellness, social peace, and societal harmony. IHMC suggests activities for the month include Muslim food fests, public education on halal diet, donation of non-perishable food items for food banks, and highlight Muslim hospitality. An online event to address common motherhood challenges faced by Muslim mothers and their solutions will be held tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The interactive session will be led by Runda Ebiet, who is an occupational therapist, a mother care blogger, and a mother. She is also the founder of Ruh app, a mindfulness app designed for Muslims. A mum burnout series will also be launched during the event, which will be narrated by Ebiet. The registration can be done via Ruh app or by reserving a spot through muslimlink.com. A Palestinian teen shot dead by Israeli forces in a raid in the occupied West Bank was yesterday put to rest. According to a statement by a Palestinian ministry, 17-year-old Dirar al-Kifrini sustained serious injuries by the Israeli forces during Tuesday's Jenin refugee camp raid. He later succumbed to his wounds. Eyewitnesses said the raid triggered clashes between Palestinians and Israeli forces, during which the Israeli forces used live bullets, tear gas canisters, and stun grenades. The Israeli army frequently carries out wide-ranging arrest campaigns across the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem on the pretext of searching for wanted Palestinians. And that's it for the news. It is the month of Muharram, one of the 4 sacred months in the Islamic calendar. It's also the first month in the Islamic calendar, which follows a lunar cycle. New Year in Canada was on July 29th, making July 30 the first of Muharram. Muharram contains some very special days that Muslims commemorate. And to talk to us about how Canada's Shia community is commemorating, we talk to Sheikh Mohammed Rizvi. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, sister.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Can you tell, in case there's somebody amongst the audience who's not aware, what is special about Muharram?
For the Shia Muslims, Muharram actually is a very significant month for us because it is related to this commemoration of the massacre which took place in Karbala in Iraq in the 61st year of the Hijrah, where Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the younger grandson of the Prophet, along with his companions, about 100 people, were massacred on that one day known as the day of Ashura, the 10th of Muharram. and this is commemorated by the Shias globally in a very intense manner.
Now, unfortunately, there have been a lot of killing in Islamic histories, but why would it be this particular massacre that would be special and to commemorate?
Well, I think the first issue would be the person who was killed. You know, you're talking about the younger grandson of the Prophet Hussein, and we can talk about it quite a lot, but I'll just suffice with two very short statements from the Prophet in the Shia and Sunni hadith sources, where in one the Prophet says, Husaynun minni wa ana min Husayn. Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein, which shows a very, a very important, status for Hussein, especially the latter part where he says, I am from Hussein. In a sense that the survival of the faith, the spirit of Islam would be by his sacrifice. And the other statement, which is again in the all Muslims agree on that, where the Prophet said, Al-Hasan wal-Hussein Sayyid al-Shabab Ahl al-Jannah, Hassan and Hussein, the two brothers, the grandsons of the Prophet, they are the chiefs of the youths of paradise. So you're talking about somebody who has a higher status in this dunya, in this world, as well as the hereafter. And so his massacre for us and of his small group, it was an important issue not to be forgotten.
You mentioned that Shia worldwide commemorate this. Is there anything different about the rituals that you will do in the Canadian context?
I think the way it is done would be very similar all over, but the language would change. It depends because we are in Canada. So you have all different kinds of, Shia Islamic centers. But now the trend is to have more English-speaking, scholars to come in, and so there is a whole, in a way, a ritualistic way of doing it, beginning with poetry, and then the scholar will give a address, 45 minutes to an hour maximum, and then there again be some poetry commemorating and narrating the tragedy of various martyrs on that day. And so this happens every night for 10 nights.
I want to ask you more about that in a minute, but just to get back to the question of language, I know that in some of the other mosques, it's very controversial if an imam decides to give a khutbah, a sermon in Arabic or English. Do you have that same controversy in the Shia mosques?
No, I think we have already, passed that stage of controversy. I think now the immigrant generation is there, but their children are either raised or born here, and now they are themselves young parents. And
so
I think
would that be a majority? Would the younger generation now be a majority of the congregants, and that's why people are switching to English?
I would say yes. Yes.
So let's get back to the 10 days that you were mentioning. I understand that you're actually not in Canada at the moment. You're in New Jersey as part of a like a swap arrangement. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it is kind of, I don't know when it started, but this has been from the time I know from my childhood that normally the imams or the scholars who are in their own masajid or centers, during those 10 to 12 days of commemoration of Muharram, they would be going somewhere else where they're invited. And in their center, they would invite somebody else. So you have a new speaker coming in, and it gives if I may use the term, a relief to even the audience. They see, for example, all the times they see me, but now for the 12 days, they'll have a guest speaker coming in. And even for us as imams and scholars, we get the opportunity to see different communities, come to know about them. And that's a process of learning for ourselves also. To see their challenges and their success.
You mentioned that it's a 10 nightly program, and you have to give a speech every night then. It's a lot of work preparing a speech. How do you decide on the themes that you want to cover, and also so that it doesn't get boring for the audience?
Well, it is actually, it varies from person to person. Sometimes the scholars themselves decide what they want to do, the theme that they will select. There will be a coordination with the organizers of the center. What are the issues, what they expect, from the scholar to address. And so it could be a variety of situations. Some scholars, for example, every night would have a different theme.
Mm.
Some will take one theme and kind of spread it in 10 lectures.
And what's your preference? What have you been doing?
I'm basically looking at the history of the Imams of Shia, the 12 Imams that we talk about.
Mm.
And I'm focusing actually not just the events and history per se, rather I'm looking at the events of how we can relate to those examples about living as a minority in this part of the world, especially our participation and interaction in the socio-political system here.
So we don't have a lot of time left, but can you just give us a glimpse of what the answer you give to that question is?
Well, the answer, basically, I'm trying to give different scenarios that there is no yes and no answer to that. It's not a black and white situation. Every situation has to be evaluated on its own, and then you should decide whether you would cooperate with the system or you would stay aloof, or if you cooperate, what level of cooperation would be there. So it could be all different scenarios, especially focusing on the example of the Imams that we believe in. So it's not a black and white or yes and no answer, but the emphasis is that even though we are a non-Muslim system, we cannot be living in isolation. We have to be part of the system, at least to make things better for minorities, and especially for the Muslim minority in this part.
If someone from outside the community who's not used to these nightly commemorations were to attend, would they find it to be sort of like a very overwhelmingly sad event? Are people crying, or what's the spirit there?
Yes, if they have not seen it before, it might be very overwhelming, because at the end of the speech, we end up with narration of one incident of the day of Ashura. Every night would be a different, martyr we talk about. Especially from the family of Hussein, whether it's his young son or his nephew or his brother, or especially on the eve of 10th Muharram, the focus is on the 6-month-old baby of Hussein ibn Ali who was killed. And that becomes very, of course, emotional, and even the speakers cry and even the audience cry.
So it can be very cathartic, I imagine. But unfortunately, although I have other things I want to ask you, we're out of time. But thank you very much for joining us for this show.
You're welcome, sister.
Thank you for watching Canadian Muslim News. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe, and God bless.